If you've been scrolling through endless rows of monitors, comparing specs like 5K resolution and Thunderbolt 4 and still feel stuck wondering which one actually makes sense for your workflow, this review is here to clear that up. I've spent a few days setting up a Mac Studio with a couple of different 27-inch panels, reading through a handful of comments from people who've already taken the plunge, and testing the workflow yourself. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's walk through why the ViewSonic VP2788 5K might be the answer you didn't know you needed, or why it could be a nice-to-have you can skip. First off, the biggest question people ask is, do I really need a 5K monitor for photo editing or video work? The answer isn't a simple yes or no, it hinges on how you actually use your screen. If you're a photographer who spends hours fine-tuning raw files in Lightroom, a native 5K display gives you about 27 inches of screen real estate with a pixel density that lets you see details that a 4K panel would blur. In that scenario, the VP2788 5K's 51202880 resolution translates into crisp edge-to-edge detail, and the Pantone validated 99% DCI-P3 coverage means colors stay true to what you'd see in print. I tested a typical Lightroom develop session. The white balance adjustments, selective color sliders, and sharpening previews all felt tighter because the software could render more pixels without having to downsample. For that kind of precise work, the monitor's color fidelity does more than look good on paper, it actually reduces the need for frequent screen calibrations. On the flip side, if your daily routine is more about drafting emails, browsing the web, or watching videos, you'll probably never notice the difference between a 4K and a 5K panel. The extra pixels end up being extra only when you have a reason to use them. In that case, the VP2788 5K becomes a premium you're paying for an experience you don't fully exploit. The price point sits well above many reputable 4K alternatives, so the value proposition narrows to those who need that exacting color and resolution. Now, let's talk connectivity. The monitor ships with a full Thunderbolt 4 port that can deliver up to 90 W of power. That means you can plug your Mac Studio or a MacBook Pro directly into the monitor with a single cable and get video, data, and charging all at once. In my test setup, the cable ran from the Mac Studio's USB-C output straight to the monitor, and the desktop booted up with the display recognized instantly, no fiddling with display settings or extra adapters. The same port also supports daisy chaining, so you could add another Thunderbolt-compatible display downstream without reaching for more cables. For creators who already own a Thunderbolt dock, the monitor essentially becomes another node in the chain, simplifying desk clutter. One hidden trade-off appears when you try to use the monitor for gaming or high frame rate content. The 5K panel is locked at a 60 Hz refresh rate, which is fine for photo and video editing, but it feels limiting if you also want a smooth gaming experience. I tried a few titles on a 60 Hz setting, and while the visuals were sharp, the motion felt a step behind a 144 Hz gaming monitor. So if your work includes a serious amount of video playback at high frame rates or you're a competitive gamer, this isn't the monitor for you. Ergonomics is where the VP2788 5K shines in subtle ways. The stand offers tilt, swivel, pivot, and height adjustments that can be fine-tuned without a wrench. I spent half an hour alternating between portrait and landscape orientations, something I often do when coding on the side and reviewing design mockups on the other. The pivot function let me rotate the screen to portrait mode, and the height dial kept my eyes level with the top of the panel, reducing neck strain after a full day of work. The stand is solid, but not as heavy as some professional-grade monitors, so you'll need to be mindful if you plan to move the unit frequently. The base can tip if the cable pulls too hard. Another practical consideration is the built-in USB hub. On paper it looks appealing, a few USB-A ports for your keyboard, mouse, and a flash drive. In practice, the hub shares bandwidth with the Thunderbolt connection, and while you won't notice a difference for typical peripherals, high-throughput devices like external SSDs can see a slight dip in speed compared to a dedicated USB-C dock. If your workflow demands rapid file transfers directly to an external drive, you may want to keep a separate dock for those tasks. Who should buy this monitor? If you're a professional photographer, colorist, or video editor using a Mac Studio or a high-end MacBook Pro, the combination of 5K resolution, Pantone validation, and Thunderbolt 4 connectivity creates a tightly integrated workstation. The monitor essentially becomes an extension of your Mac, delivering the exact color space you need without external calibrators. It also works well for graphic designers who appreciate the ability to pivot to portrait mode for long-form layouts. In short, anyone whose work hinges on color.